endangered birds. Today's talk will focus on conservation of their parrots and address the broader issue of Caribbean vulnerability after natural disasters with an example from Hurricane Maria. So take it away, team.
Yes, let me just say good afternoon to everyone. Stephen Durand, working with the Forestry, Wildlife and Parks Division in Dominica. And with me is Dr. Paul Reillo, who is the president of Rare Species Conservatory Foundation. In 1996, we established a wildlife conservation with Rare Species Conservatory Foundation that brought about amazing things, and to include the documenting of wild Cicero reproduction, as well as wild Jackal reproduction using technology, moving away from the traditional monitoring systems and including technology, cameras, where we saw many different activities, things that we probably were not able to catch, monitoring traditionally. And so we did quite a number of work, tremendous work. We were able to use the people type cameras as well to monitor nest cavities and see the progress of chicks in the nest cavities. We also were able to do a number of protection measures, work on the Forestry and Wildlife Act in 2003. We continued our law enforcement activities. We did tremendous work, always, on the ball, monitoring areas where parrots were very strong. And in our protected areas, we also saw the establishment of the Montauk Diablo National Park in 2000, the first of its kind within the region. And there were multiple expansions during that time with assistance from Rare Species. We also saw the monitoring of our parrots in a program established by the Forestry Division following Hurricane David, where with support of the World Wildlife Fund, we were monitoring populations and habitat. And I joined that program in 1981. With the energies from the partnership with Rare Species, we added new technology that helped with using GPS to do a number of surveys in several of our parrot strongholds and other areas where we never saw parrots. And so we're happy to have Rare Species, to work with Rare Species, and some of our colleagues who are now not even on the program, they are actually out of forestry, but we did tremendous work in terms of finding out what our parrots were doing in some of our forest regions.
It's great to be here with everybody. Thank you so much for having us. One of the great things about this program was that we were able to develop some very novel technologies and techniques for not only assessing the distribution and abundance of Dominica's endemic parrots, but also really looking at the recovery of these birds post Hurricane David in 1979, which brought the Imperial Parrot down to perhaps as few as 50 birds and smashed the Jackal population down to maybe 100, 150 birds or so. So one of the techniques that we developed was a moving map, GPS, GIS-based survey technique, which was highly repeatable. And it was done because of Dominica's challenging terrain and its dense forest cover. And these are very cryptic species, particularly the Imperial. But what we saw over the course of 20 years and really 38 years post David was a steady recovery of the Imperial to a population of between 300 and 400 birds. The much more prolific and social Jackal parrot achieved a post-David high of maybe 1,000 to 1,200 birds. These surveys were ongoing for 18 years prior to Maria, and really established a baseline for us to see the expansion of the parrot populations to their pre-David status. The program also celebrated kind of a fortuitous and accidental achievement, and that was the first captive breeding of the Imperial Parrot, very cryptic species that lays a single egg maybe every other year at most. Sometimes, rarely, we'll have a 2-egg clutch. But 2 rescued birds that have been rehabilitated in the aviary, known as the Parrot Conservation and Research Center, successfully consummated their marriage, and yes, in the year of 2010, successfully hatched a chick. And this enabled us for the first time to document the development from egg to adulthood of the Imperial Parrot. Bearing in mind that captive breeding was never, and has never been a part of the recovery process for Dominica's parrots. At the root of this program is just the profound connection between this, not only the symbolism and the emblems of parrots in Dominican culture, but what I would call the heart and soul of Dominica's identity as the nature island of the Caribbean. You can see parrot emblems all over the country, and they're found in every walk of life, really. But it's the last line of the screen where you see the Kalinago, indigenous people of Dominica, imagining to be reincarnated as parrots. We have just a deep and more than just a symbolic, but truly an inspirational connection between parrots and people. And that's very important, because not only does the parrot find itself at the center of Dominica's flag, making it the quintessential flagship species, but also these birds are responsible, really, for the conservation of the inland forest, the oceanic rainforest that provides the biological and structural architecture for the biodiversity of Dominica. And these ancient trees, many of which were standing when Columbus first sighted the island, provide nest cavities, food, and roosting sites. But they also provide that infrastructure for so many other species that get no conservation attention at all.
Well, sadly, on September 18, 2017, Dominica experienced one of the most devastating hurricanes that just wiped out infrastructure and really disrupted the lives, people's lives, and the parrots, the forest suffered very much. And you can see the changes before and after Maria in the strongholds in the north, that's Mont Diablote area, as well as the other stronghold in the south, in the Monwat area, foothills of Monwat, the Wabesson area. So there are a number of areas where in valleys especially, the parrots were able to survive. There was less impact, less damage to the forest there. Also at the aviary, we saw little damage to the aviary, but the display cages got, the display cage got destroyed. And so all of the birds, the stock, the resident stock, they were safely evacuated, and we really did not have too much to worry about these birds. The concentration really was on what happened in the wild. And we saw nest trees and nest cavities damaged all over in many areas, no nests and cavities. We lost a number of nests, we lost a number of cavities, active cavities. So I was saying, as well as the birds, they were able to survive in areas in valleys, especially in Syndicate Valley, in Monrachet, Salisbury Heights, the Central Forest Range. The birds had some areas where they were able to survive. The forest was less impacted, and so we saw the birds coming back. We began to see birds, active again, and the forest, within a short space of time, within 5 to 8 weeks, the forest began to show marked changes in most of forest types, and trees were flushing new leaves, flowering and shooting fruits, and the birds became happy again. And we were happy to see the birds, in a number of areas. It was sort of heartbreaking. For me, it was heartbreaking when I saw the first Imperial. But the jackals had already moved away from the forest and moved to coastal areas, and some of them coming in close proximity to communities, and we're finding stuff, for them to forage on. We had an amazing discovery, the yellow jackal. This bird, I heard about this bird all of my life in forestry, and well, I would not want to say praise God to Maria, but interestingly, Maria flushed out this bird from the forest, And for me, it was the first time seeing this bird on the Northeast coast. And it was really amazing, you know, to see this bird. I heard about it all of the time. Farmers spoke about it. Some of my colleagues saying that they saw it. I never saw it before then, but this is one of the amazing sceneries, you know, following Maria.
Along with the storm came an opportunity to do rescues. So many of the birds suffered very, very badly. But thanks to our dedicated friends and colleagues at IFAW and Forestry's team, many birds were rescued, more than 20 jackals. They came in various states of disrepair, but thanks to excellent veterinary care. And remember, the country was really wrecked at this point. People are suffering, homes are destroyed, and yet there was excellent care being provided to these animals. And the whole point was that these are animals that were wild. They were hatched in the wild. The goal was to rehabilitate them and put them back out. And the aviary, the PCRC, provided excellent care for these animals. So much so that, in fact, jackals were re-released back to the wild. And this was the real take-home message from that time, which is that despite the hardship, despite the calamity, there was an opportunity to do the right thing and get wildlife back in the wild where it belonged. We also launched immediately the post-Maria assessments of the parrot populations, thanks to help from Bird Caribbean and Laurel Park Foundation. Rare Species threw a bunch of money at it. A lot of friends helping. All the forestry's vehicles were damaged or destroyed in Hurricane Maria, so a new forestry vehicle was needed. And this young man, my partner and friend and colleague, was out there with these guys, knocking it out day in, day out without power and water, and they were still in the field doing their very best. And that's really why it was such a terrible tragedy to see that with so much happening after Maria and the parrots starting to come back as we knew they would, to see that 12 birds were secretively swept off the island by ACTP in March 2018. Not only because these people had no credentials, no qualifications for doing this, they'd never done anything on Dominica, there's no science behind it, no transparency to the proposal, the reason for doing this, but also because they're convicted criminals. And this agency, this organization swept in and did this thing very secretively and really wrecked the program, did an amazing amount of damage to this program. And it was well documented and teased out by Lisa Cox at The Guardian over an investigation taking more than a year. And it also was recently exposed in just last month's Audubon magazine, talking about the Parrot King, and that is not a moniker of affection. That's a knockoff of the Tiger King. And let's just be very blunt and clear about this. These sorts of exports to bird collectors in Europe, this is not conservation. This is wildlife trade. And real conservation is science-based. It's done by scientific conservation professionals, and it is done in situ. But I'm delighted to report today that we have a very exciting development, and that is with a new and fresh commitment from the new Minister of the Environment, who also represents the indigenous people, the Kalinago territory. We have a reaffirmation of a wildlife conservation partnership 24 years ago, which not only restores the activities that we've been doing all these years, but also notably mentions the repatriation of these parrots from Europe back to Dominica, which could be a complex process because of veterinary concerns, because of pathogen risks, but it is something that we're going to hold government to account. And it's so fundamental because so many Dominicans want to see their kidnapped parrots returned, and we do too. Take us home, Stephen.
Well, we're happy, you know, that our forest has continued recovering. As you can see, everywhere is almost very green, every forest type. The forest canopy is closing. The birds are doing well, but what we need to do is to find out what the birds are really doing in some of the major forest habitats, the Imperial in particular. We need to find out what it's doing. So we need to get back to work and we need to continue what we're doing. Dominica has never really had any legal trade in parrots. We've always been fighting the poachers, these international poachers, these people from Europe. And so we think that our birds need to be roaming the wild as they have done for more than 600 years, you know, with all of these intense storms, surviving these intense storms. And we think that the birds continue to do well following the storms. If, for example, there needs to be any population recovery, that we should.
Sorry, Stephen, you've reached the end of your time. So you are muted now, but you can unmute yourself now. We will have a question and answer period based on the questions that your our attendees have asked. The one question for you in particular is, was that yellow jackal eating Pisidia flowers from the fish kill tree, the fish poison tree?
No, that's the tree we refer to as gloricida. It's
Okay.
gloricida we refer to it as. It's a sort of nitrogen fixation plant.
All right,
that we use in agriculture.
thank you. And they asked, who is the ACTP? What does that acronym stand for?
It's a Association for the Conservation of Threatened Parrots.
But it was fake, right? That name wasn't really accurate for what they do, was it?
Well, we all know that. We know that it's just a fake, fake organization.
Okay.
And I think Paul explained that very
right.
well.
And we have a question: how have the local farmers responded to conservation since parrots can be pests for farms and stuff?
Well, the problem with the farmers and the parrots is mainly has to do with the jackals. It's just one species, and that began immediately after Hurricane David, and so I think we've understood the problem. We're trying. I have been trying my best with a new approach to deal with the issues, and that is to get farmers more involved in agroforestry, planting tree crops that would help with to serve as food for human beings as well as the birds. So the birds can have a supply, many different species that we can, use as for agroforestry purposes.
All right, thank you very much. Scott Johnson, there is a question for you. If you could pop back on for us. The guests want to know if the Kirklands Wobbler's preferred fruit trees occur more frequently on farmland or disturbed early successional lands, and could or should those fruit trees be promoted in these locations?
So I think I may have answered that question already, but Kirklands Wobbler fruit is found in more disturbed areas. They prefer that recently disturbed habitat, and those fruits again are wild sage, black torch, and snowberry. I think the reason why we found so much of them on the goat farm is because, one, the goats are browsing the vegetation on a regular basis, thereby assisting with assisting the plants with competitive plants, as well as the water table is close to the surface. So it's adding, so the plants are getting a regular supply of water, which means that they're producing a lot more fruit. And therefore, because they're in fruit so often and more frequently than in other areas, the birds are going to congregate in those areas where the food is available.
All right, excellent. I would like to remind everyone that this symposium continues tomorrow from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. and then again from 2 to 3 p.m. And from 3 to 3:30, we will have a panel discussion and Q&A, which will involve the speakers from this symposium. So please join us for that, for tomorrow's session as well. I have another question. Scott, as well as Stephen, after the hurricanes, and anyone else who wants to answer it, after hurricanes, we have globally, there's a disaster tourism culture where people come into the country after the earthquake in Haiti, Hurricane Maria in Dominica and Puerto Rico, after Hurricane Dorian, and in many other situations. And we have this issue of smuggling regularly. Our borders are porous. We're small island developing states. What do you think is the biggest problem that we will have to deal with in the near future with, smuggling or protecting our animals, especially these rare, endangered, endemic creatures that people don't find them elsewhere, so they want them as trophies? What's the biggest challenge?
Can I go ahead?
Go ahead, yes.
Seriously speaking, I think our problems is really the persons at the helm. In our case, I think we saw our parrots leaving Dominica with the assistance from senior government officials. And so these are the people who are supposed to, you know, set the examples, ensure that there's strong legislation, there's strong regulations to ensure that, you know, people do not take our birds out without authority. And they should understand there should be reason why we should not be taking our birds out of the country and work with our birds. Because you're talking about endemism. These birds are endemic to our country. They mean a lot to our country. And so we need to understand the values, the importance, the significance of the species to our country, what they can contribute to our country. And so the people at the helm need to understand this. I am sure that you walk down the street in Roseau today, the young people and most people will tell you what has happened to our parrots, when our parrots coming back. So they understand the values. The people on the ground understand the values of our species, of our, you know, our wildlife. But while the people at the helm does not really understand that, they are the ones who should, or they pretend that they do not understand.
Excellent.
And I'm sorry to say that, well, I am out of forestry now. I'm on pre-retirement leave. And so I am trying to wonder who's going to fight for the parrots. So ACTP is going to come again after any intense storm. If we, praise God, we're not going to have one. But if there's one, they will come back again and take birds. I'm telling you. Who's going to stop them?
Thank you. Scott, do you have something to add?
I think Mr. Durand has really articulated a lot of what was needed to be said. I think another major issue, and before the Zoom cuts off, another major issue would be that the lack of enforcement and the knowledge of the enforcement staff needs to be upped, especially in the Bahamas. A lot of them still aren't familiar with a lot of the species that we have, the terrestrial species. Everybody knows about conch grouper and those kind of things, but they're not aware of some of our snakes are critically endangered, some of our birds are critically endangered, that kind of thing. So that enforcement needs to be ramped up, educated, and then needs to be ramped up. And the enforcement needs to be strictly enforced. You can't just let anybody do whatever it is that they want. So I just want to add that.
Thank you. And from my perspective, we, throughout the conservation community, we're now dealing a lot with the issues of racism, colonialism, and really empowering local people in a new way. And the NAOC is really committed to that. Birds Caribbean is committed to that. And we're supporting developing the mentorship programs across conservation nowadays and really involving more people of color and local people, which I think is really special. And we saw that a lot in today's presentations. Every presentation had featured like really prominently the individuals that were locally doing the work. And unfortunately, we have a lot of scientists that still believe that local people don't have the knowledge or don't care about their local species. And that's unfortunate, but we at Birds Caribbean have shown through our 30 years of work that there is a lot of really amazing talent throughout the Caribbean. And we hope that you come and join us tomorrow, 4 to 5 p.m. for our meet and greet, so that you can interact with some of the people that want to work in the Caribbean or who are already working into the Caribbean and really strengthen this network that we have going on. And again, you can reach us at Birds Caribbean on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And please continue to follow and share your take-home messages from this symposium and from the NAOC 2020. Finally, we have a question about funding and support from CARICOM. Do we have any of our presenters who are getting support from CARICOM generally coming down to your work or otherwise?
I am really not sure how much CARICOM contributes to support for conservation in our islands. Well, in our case in Dominica, I am really not sure. Most of the funding comes from other organizations, conservation organizations on the outside, and funders, donors from the outside, as well as local government.
Okay.
Can I just say thanks very much to Lisa. I want to say big up Lisa for having us in this conference. And, I'm really extremely happy that she allowed us, to be on there. And I'm happy that we were able to, contribute to this conference.
Woohoo! Yay, Lisa! Woo!
Good job. Thank you, Lisa. Lisa is the Executive Director of Birds Caribbean, for those that don't know her. But again, you can reach out to any of us through Birds Caribbean. And definitely we'll be around through the rest of this meeting and enjoying our different places throughout the Caribbean. Do we have any? I think we're getting kicked out now.
Great work. Birds Caribbean.
Birds Caribbean.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we have that difference, right? Who's Birds Caribbean and who's Birds Caribbean? Right. You all did amazing presentations, and please join us for parts 2 and 3 of this symposium tomorrow.